welcome back again to another episode of Arc Insights, the official podcast channel of Arc Spaces. Today, this evening, we have Benjamin from Kinobi. So if you're wondering what Kinobi is, it's actually a digital career accelerator who happens to be really concentrated on the Gen Z side of things. So without spoiling too much, probably Ben, you might want to introduce more about yourself, the company, and why you and your team are doing what you guys do today.
Okay, thanks much, Cleve. Yeah, so I think a very simple kind of introduction of Kinobi. So I always start off with this. Or some people they ask me because my email is ben@kinobi.asia, so they always like, oh, so is it the Star Wars? Yeah, so always comes up. Yeah, yeah. So I think it really started from there. In a way that I thought it was very interesting that there's Anakin Skywalker and
Oh.
Darth Vader.
Okay.
And there's the duality of things, right?
Mhm.
Where you have someone who can choose to go to the good side or the dark side.
Right.
Yeah, everyone has a choice. So I think that was how we wanted to build our company, to really give people the choice to make. Like, how do you want to lead your life, right? Can you help these people discover their talents and achieve the satisfaction in their jobs? So I think really that's our impetus for starting this. Yeah, so as we evolve, right, we realized that to solve this problem, and that's how we came with our tagline today, to be a digital career accelerator for Asia's Gen Z.
Awesome.
Yeah, is to really just go down, provide them with career tools that they can use at any time of the day. Like when they're on like 1 a.m. on their bed, they are worrying about the future. They want answers, right? So they will start to use our app.
I see.
And more importantly, I think what we're really supporting is the main clients of ours, which is the universities that are using it for the students. Because for universities themselves, we realize that more than the students, right, they're the ones that need help. They have like 2 people supporting 1,000 students. Yeah, it's a lot of work. Like, imagine a university, you have like 1 professor supporting 40 students, right? This is 2 supporting 1,000.
Oh, okay.
So really that like the amount of work and the amount of like data they need to really help make decisions for students is needed. Yeah, so that's how we position ourselves. A little more about our use cases in some ways and why what people use us for, universities and then the students.
Interesting. It sounds really ambitious and very dynamic in terms of the journey you and your team had, right? So certainly, at least from myself, right, I'm quite different as compared to someone who is Gen Z. I'm sure you are as well, right? So
I'm Gen Z.
yeah, I heard that you
try to dress like Gen Z now. No choice.
Yeah, I can see you are really casually dressed today.
Yeah.
That's very interesting to see. So people like you and me, right, we got exposed to different learning materials around us, like directly and indirectly, right? So, and the atmosphere during our growing up years also determine like how we perceive things in life, right? So probably yourself, you might want to explain more about the characteristics of the Gen Z workforce in more detail compared to other generations.
Okay, this is honestly a very, very good question. Because I think the Gen Zs, right, in general, if you ask them, right, they don't know themselves. Also, so it's like they don't know themselves. Then we who are much older, or like even those that are the parents, right, don't understand them also. So it's a very interesting generation because like we're all trying to figure out like what do these people really want? How can we help harness their talent? Back in like our days and even our parents' days, it's a lot easier, you come out to work, then you just work lah, right? That's it. But nowadays, you realize that they have these aspirations, which are not wrong because we gave them prosperity in many ways. We gave them a comfortable place, and that's where people started to think about higher order thinking stuff. Like, I want to have fulfillment, I want to have satisfaction. I mean, like in our parents' days and nowadays, like if you talk about satisfaction, you're like, just go and work, why must you think about like why is it that you need to find something that really meets what your needs are?
Exactly.
But I think these days, right, it's where I'd see it as a step forward actually, because even though like you can call themselves what strawberry generation and things like that, but they are the ones who they are trying to figure out where it is that I really fit into it and I really enjoy what I'm doing. Yeah, so that that part there where they don't understand what it is, we want to be that platform that helps them to understand themselves. Yeah, to say that they put in their skills. They say I'm good at this, and then they can also put in and say that, hey, these are my aspirations. This is what I want to be like. I want to be like maybe someone who works in tech. I want to be a software engineer. I want to be a designer. And then we help them find out, hey, if you want to be this, but you only have these skill sets, how can you improve? What are you having a mismatch in? So we point them to courses, you point them to talking to coaches, point them to talk to certain things on a platform. They help them prepare them for this. So I think really that's the Gen Z generation that we're talking about. And I think another thing which I want to highlight here is really that they learn very differently in this time, especially in COVID-19. COVID-19 is something that, we wouldn't wish this on even our worst enemy. We're all in this together, right? But I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy to go back to school during COVID-19. Yeah, if you talk to the users and if you talk to our students, they are all on Zoom university. And like they don't have the physical interaction. Like learning is actually very tough. I would totally zone out if I was a student. So these are the things that the Gen Zs are facing today. There is very hard for them to really find interest in learning. There is little engagement in terms of finding out what is my purpose. Yeah, and we want to give them this platform that allows them to do that. Yeah,
Right.
and that's why a lot of them they go to TikTok to find purpose. It's also because the fact that if you're cooped up at home, whether in Singapore I think we're relatively quite okay. On the other markets we serve, like for example Indonesia, Philippines, Thailand, there is even in the rural areas, etc., especially with this whole COVID, it's just better for people to just stay at home sometimes, especially if you want to stay healthy, right? And that's something which you don't have. You have a lack of avenues to do, and I think that is the kind of environment that they grew up in. Yeah, so understanding all these things helps to really shape a perspective that actually Gen Zs, they really need help. They are a group of people with a lot of potential, but they need platforms where they can grow and develop themselves. And I think that's really what we want to be for them.
I see, understand. So from what your team and yourself are doing, you're also trying to make learning curriculums more interesting, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
correct.
and I can see why they venture into TikTok and learn stuff from there instead.
Yeah.
Because I believe I also heard that the Gen Z community, their attention span is really short as well.
Yeah, very short.
Yeah, so that's the thing, man. Yeah. So anyway, since you and your team has been rather specialized in the Gen Z career development field, right? Could you share with us what are the key benefits of hiring Gen Z talents, and are there any like case studies which you can share with us when any Gen Z talents have made a huge contribution to a company according to your experience in Kinobi?
Okay. Yeah. So I think Gen Z talent, right, is a group of talent where there's this quote which says that, and it's by a philosopher. I don't remember which philosopher it is. Yeah. And it says that every generation would think itself to be smarter than the generation before it,
Yeah.
and wiser than the generation after it.
Mm.
And it's always the case.
Yeah.
So we always think we're smarter than our parents. We always think we're wiser than our kids. It's the same for them. They always think they're smarter than us, right? May not be true, but may be true in some sense. I think what has changed is that some of these Gen Z kids are smarter in some sense because they are more flexible. They grew up in an environment where, as you mentioned, short attention span. And I think that really necessitates themselves to go to the point very fast. And that's one trait that I think Gen Zs have very well.
They're very
They are
straightforward.
very straightforward. They are able to just point out and say that this is the thing we need to get done. Let's just go ahead to the point, which is good for some companies, especially if you're in a startup, especially if you're in a fast-growing company,
Right.
where it's very reliant upon growth and results. So I think this is where Gen Z talent really strives to succeed a lot. And that's where I think a lot of startups they tend to be they're okay if it's not about age anymore. It's about who can tahan the stress in some ways. And that's where Gen Z talent, in a way, they do survive well because they're young, they have more energy levels, they're able to go faster and things like that. So that's where I think they will really do well. So from my experience, we place people into your top tech firms. And I think one thing that we notice about them is that they really do perform. Yeah, they perform the job. They're able to get things done. They're able to showcase and understand that there is this mental flexibility about them. I'm able to see that there are things that need to get done. Maybe this is the old way they did it, but perhaps this is a more efficient way, and this is my logic and reasons why. And they're able to articulate that, which is pretty cool.
I see.
Yeah, and I think that the last thing which for Gen Z talent that they have developed, if anyone wants to hire Gen Z talent, right, I would say that the best Gen Z talent are those that have run communities and run in Singapore we call it CCAs and so on. The reason is because CCAs are effectively a bit like a company, right? You may not have like profit and loss, but you work around a budget. You understand how to allocate resources. You know how to hire people. You understand what is needed to get something running and done and achieve a certain set of goals. So those Gen Z talent who led these organizations, they're more likely than not to succeed because they understand what it takes. So even though they may not have run a fully fledged, profit and loss for a company before, they understand what it takes to really run it at least their own level. So they have the experience. So even though they're young, I think we shouldn't belittle certain things they have done. So I think this is something interesting that many companies don't realize about these Gen Z talent.
Right, you raised out a lot of good points on the benefits of hiring Gen Z over there. I can really sense it out. And there's one part that you talked about being straightforward, things like that. I have a question leading to that about keep that to the later question. Yeah. So understand that Gen Z, they are the youngest batch of talents out there right now. So so far we have already heard from you about how they behave and work. So hopefully our audiences out there today, they can gain some valuable insights, right, and facts about the Gen Z talent pool. But because Gen Z today, right, is still such a misunderstood batch, right, and people seems to still overlook them without giving them much chances to prove themselves, so-called, right? So despite knowing what Gen Z can do for us, right, what else can employers do today to bring the best out of them besides giving them a chance to understand them?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. I think it's really happening. For example, in marketing divisions, right, you have this new term called the growth hacker. The growth hacker is someone who is able to use, it's like someone who sits between the product, the tech team in some ways, the marketing team, and the senior management to decipher what are the KPIs to grow the company and what does it take from each of them to get there. So it will measure that and also define what are the paths, what is the framework to actually get there. So that person usually in this case is a young person. The reason being that a lot of the marketing channels are like TikTok. Yeah, and TikTok is something that most people actually don't understand. If you ask a person doing Instagram, most of the time he doesn't understand what TikTok is.
Are you a TikTok person?
So I'm not a TikTok person, but I recently had to do a few TikToks because I realized that I was supervising a marketing team, right? And I asked them why the TikTok not booming, Yeah, I asked them, I thought your KPI is this, why you never meet the KPI? And then they're like, boss, you think so easy, is it? Why don't you go and try it yourself? So I was like, okay, let me try myself.
It takes a lot of
so I thought it was interesting because I asked myself, is it because I'm older then I cannot do TikTok? And then I found out there's no, actually even if you're older you can still do TikTok. And I use the same methods, right, of deciphering how to boom on Instagram and to boom on TikTok. It's almost the same, except for TikTok it's the same thing, like you figure out who the influencers are, you copy some of their styles, you figure out what the algorithm behind is, and then I managed to do it. So yesterday my video got 16k views.
Awesome.
800 follower TikTok. Okay, so not bad. Yeah, I give myself a pat on the back. I tell my interns that, hey, actually, your boomer boss also can also do TikTok. So I mean, like these are the reasons why I think as a Gen Z, they're able to do this and teach us. Yeah, so these are the traits of how you can actually use a Gen Z properly. If you ask like someone like me or someone my age even, or like someone maybe slightly older to do TikTok and to do that effectively, most of them will be like, that is uncomfortable. I the only reason is because I'm CEO. I need to try it out, right? Else I don't know what I'm doing. But most people would not do the reverse. They would say, okay, I'll just stick to Instagram. Why should I do this to TikTok? So I think that's one way they can hire the Gen Zs for. Another way that I'm thinking about really is that Gen Zs, you can give them projects that are like high risk of failure, but there is no answer. Those type of things are the best for Gen Zs to do, because Gen Zs have no experience. They won't go inside there and have a presupposition that this thing is going to fail.
So they like to do such projects?
Depends lah, but the thing is that it's easier to ask them to do it. Firstly, because of course they're young, they're inexperienced.
Okay.
And they are, even if they come as a management associate, they have to perform lah. They're just starting on their careers, right? So the inertia for them to succeed and to say yes to doing it is much lower. Versus you ask like someone who's mid-career, and then you tell them that, hey, I ask you to start something new, like career suicide, like what if it fails, right?
Right.
Yeah. So versus, I would say that I would still encourage companies to do this, because that's where it aligns, right? For the person you hired to do this, it aligns. The person has incentive to do it, versus other people in other generations. And then second is that they don't have the presuppositions, so they won't have that preconceived notion that you're asking me to do a suicidal task, right? And then thirdly is also because they just need the experience, so it's easier to convince them that, hey, you try this out. Yeah, so that's what I would suggest companies to do, especially so there's this talk all about innovation, right? In companies.
Yeah.
But of course, we all know that as companies innovate, sometimes it's just a word lah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Whether they really do it or not, that's another question. But I think how companies can really truly innovate is there's initial. If you ask if someone who's much older to innovate, it's tough, right? Why not just give it to the Gen Z person to do it? The Gen Z person might even excel and then lead the division for you and bring better profits. So I think at the end of the day, that's how I would encourage companies to utilize them.
Right. Is it also because of the way they are brought up? They are less afraid of failure as well as a generation.
Or as a generation.
Is it?
I feel that that's not a totally true statement.
Okay.
So if you compare, right? I studied economics in school, so if you look at maybe the Gen X actually had it slightly easier because they had the college fees were lower, standard of living and prices were lower. I mean, most of, let's say my parents when they graduated, they can buy car already. Now you want to buy car, you just go and dream, the government tell you to take the MRT, right? Yeah. So I mean, there's and what about the Gen Zs? I think it's even harder for them. Yeah. In some ways, yeah. So I would say that they are actually quite afraid of failure.
Okay.
Yeah. It's just that they are more comfortable with things that those that are more senior to them probably never tried before. Yeah. So therefore, it makes them the most suitable to do it.
I see. Understand now. Okay. Those are really very interesting points overall for that question, right? So, but are there still companies that are also trying to make Gen Z talents to keep up with their own company policies instead? This is the question that I want to follow up to what you brought about just now earlier, right? So, reasons why companies might be doing this is probably because they are too worried that they might be too impatient for change, in the company or thing like that. So should companies sort of accommodate their working principles to how Gen Z work overall, or should there still be a limit to it? So how does it work today, and what's the trend going to be like moving forward?
I understand. Yeah, that's a very important question you raise. The reason is because it boils down to this. It is harder to manage junior staff than ever before,
right?
In this pandemic. And that is so my belief is that we are all the same in all the generations. Yeah. I take the belief, I take the stand. I don't know about most people, but I take the stand. I mean, we are as childish and we are as it's just corporate, right? That's why people are more the people who are older are more considered mature or act mature. But I mean, everyone's around the same. It's just much harder now to manage junior staff. And of course, and there's a certain truth to that, which is that these junior staff and the Gen Zs nowadays, they cry for mental health. Yeah, and it's in a way, I would say, not totally their fault, but at the same time, it is something that they have to solve it. Yeah, so I don't take the point of view that like, oh, we need to cuddle them and things like that. I think the point of view is that we need to do both. So what do I mean by that? So the first is where we have to cuddle them because we need to acknowledge that mental health is a huge thing today. And they grew up in very different times. And most of them they started their jobs right during COVID. None of us did that. We started our jobs like with people throwing parties for us, like having that welcome gift, really being there. You can see and feel the person's presence. They never had that. They just received like some, like, I don't know, emailer and like person online, and then they inducted into a team where everyone think they're young, and they already have all their private water cooler conversations among each other. It's very hard for them to really fit inside sometimes. Yeah, so I think these are the things that we have to acknowledge that it's tough for them. And plus, during COVID, they are entering a place where they are totally new. It's like imagine, not totally a good example, but then as an analogy, it's like you're a parent, right? You bring your kid is P1 and you go to school, but then you are trying to let the kid assimilate, and then there's a teacher trying to handhold and so on. Right? It's the same thing. It's like you are trying to ask the kid to go to school as a P1 and there's no one to support them. That kind of thing. It's just hard to support. I mean, HR is trying to support, but then it is tough because there's only so much you can do on Zoom and on virtual. Yeah, so that's one thing that we have to acknowledge that is tough for these Gen Zs. But at the same time, I must say that as a young person, they should not noir, they cannot be noir. They cannot be like, oh, like mental health is everything. If someone gives me the work to do, I cannot do it. I don't work after 6 p.m. Yeah, like that's not the attitude I think that some of them should have, which I do see some of them have.
Okay.
That they will say that, oh, it's my mental boundaries and my boundaries, and I cannot work after 6 p.m. and so on. My belief is that when you're young, right, you need to work hard. Yeah, you cannot say that I only work 9 to 6.
Yeah.
Then if you just work 9 to 6, then I mean you will not get anywhere in life, right?
You need to hustle, kids.
You need to hustle. Yeah. So I think that at the same time, although we need to acknowledge the mental health portion, but you cannot let mental health and this whole talk around it be this like barrier for them to not hustle. Yeah, which is important as a young person. Yeah, so I think this is how I would approach Gen Zs. Yeah.
Okay. Talking about hustle aside, I think all of us, we can only hustle to a certain point. We need to keep watch of our mental health as well, right? Okay. So all of those points that you brought up earlier brings us to this very interesting question, right? So the next question is less of an employment question, but more of a general question on a global scale, right? So personally, like what I feel is about like the world is getting more awareness on social issues, technology shifts, as well as climate change, right? And all these factors resonate with the soul of the Gen Z community in general, right? So like what you mentioned, they grew up in very tough times. So these are what it's going to revolve about right now. And at the same time, right, the governments of the world, they're still constantly looking to work towards like changing all of those that I mentioned just now. But to me, it seems like the progress has been a little underwhelming, especially when it comes to like social issues and climate change. It's really very slow progress, right? And there's still so much chaos around the world, revolving around things like racism, global warming, sexism, and so much more, right? So do you think if the world would start opening up to work with Gen Zs at an early stage, would the world become a better place?
Wow. I don't know the answer, I'll be honest with you. Yeah, it's a tough question to answer. Although I know this, and that's a fact. So if you look at Southeast Asia history, right, or like the history around the world, revolutions are started by students. Usually. Yeah, it explains why there are certain laws in like Southeast Asia lah.
For sure, yeah.
I mean, all of them all came from this, right? Whether it's our founding father in Singapore, whether it's in Indonesia, whether it's in Vietnam. Of course, not naming any names, but we all know who they are. Yeah, so they were all students when they actually started this. They were all quote unquote the Gen Zs of our generation when they did all this, right? So I think in general they do have a lot of power, just by virtue of the fact that it is their age. I don't think it's a generation thing. It's the fact is that they are at the age where they don't have the jadedness of being too old, but yet still have the youthfulness and the desire to make a change.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it is a virtue of that, not about generation.
Okay.
It's virtue of being at the age. So I think it is maybe correct and right that they actually do spur change in the social issues that we talk about, and it does come from them. And I think that it might even be more powerful than that, because like if you take our founding fathers for example, they did it without TikTok.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they did it without your telecommunications and getting people all together, right?
It's all just the speakers.
Loudspeakers.
Loud hailers.
Loud hailers. Yeah. Like imagine now, right? They have TikTok, right? Yeah. I mean the change and the power that they have must be even greater. Yeah.
That's a good point there.
Yeah. So I'm not too sure what's gonna happen, honestly. But we're starting to see some of these things across the world. I think more importantly is that you would start to see things impact each other even more. So, like for example, the Black Lives Movement. Yeah, although it's something which in Singapore we don't face because that's not even a topic in Singapore, right? But then it raises up issues like, for example, between the four races here in Singapore. Like each, whether it's you are in the majority or minority race, quote unquote, they all have things to say about each other just because of like BLM. Although we have nothing to do with BLM. Yeah. So I think in this generation we'll start to see more of these things happen.
Yeah, we are already seeing very young figures going to be like activists, influencers at such a young age, right?
Yes.
I think because of all the power from all these advanced telecommunications technology, things like that. Yeah, so I was wondering how this would go moving forward.
I think your guess is as good as mine, but I think we kind of know that something's going to happen.
Yeah, it's kind of exciting though.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, so last question, right? So if a company happens to be interested in getting Gen Z talents into their team, are there any signature tips from you, or rather different approaches on how a company should recruit them?
Okay. I think definitely first is that like if you want to drop a line, you can like just give a call to me, drop me a thing on LinkedIn. Probably just just chat about it and share some of my thoughts. And these are just some of my thoughts in general right now. I would say that one way to simply do it is to go back to the basics. What I mean by the basics? The basics is to show that you care for your staff. I think that's all they need. They just want to know and know that you care. Yeah, if they know that you care, they want to join you and join your company. And if you can show that through your LinkedIn, show that through your branding, employee branding, and so on, I think that's very powerful. Yeah. So to me, I focus on this because there are other ways that people do it. Like for example, you see that some very big tech firms, they have a lot of perks. You step into their offices.
Yeah.
Pantries are full stocked with Magnum ice cream. Right?
Ping pong tables, billiard tables.
And so on. and that's what, if you ask me, that's what a lot of Gen Zs actually like, in some sense, because they like to film TikToks about this. Yeah, it's many of them on TikTok. Yeah, and I think that's one way you can attract talent, but not. I wouldn't say that's the only way. And in my opinion, I believe that that should not be the only way to do it. The way you should do it is what I mentioned earlier, is to show them you care. Then that way you get talent that Gen Z talent that not only comes up to you and says, I like your perks. Right? You have Gen Z talent to come and say, I want to work for you and work hard for you and hustle for you. Very different. Yeah. So I think that's how I would find the talent, to really show that I care for them, show that this is a good place to work at, that I care for their development, and this is somewhere that you can grow to be more than you are and you started out to be. So that is how I'll do it.
So long story short, companies have to start injecting a lot more meaning into how the environment is, right?
Yes, because they look at meaning. They're very into meaning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so there you have it. So this is why and how the Gen Z community and the workforce is beyond meme-worthy. So hopefully you guys have learned something. And probably for me, if I were to become a boss, I'll probably grow up to embrace them and really, expose as much talent as possible for them to make the world a better place. Long story short, right? So I hope that you enjoyed today's episode, and hopefully to see you. We can see you the next episode as well. So stay safe, stay positive. Goodbye.